So, today we'll talk about Kenya, the nation of Kenya in Eastern Africa, and we'll be focusing on microgrids, their uses and applications, and also how electrification in the near future will assist in the sustainable development in this developing area. And you can also apply that to other developing nations around the world. So, I am going to go over the history of energy in Kenya, um, and kind of some social issues, as well as the whole energy structure there in the nation. So, Kenya started their federal power grid in the early 1920s. However, up until recently, the 1990s, the grid was very poor in structure and reliability that it really didn't reach anyone even in slightly rural areas. So today the main power supply is fossil fuels and some hydroelectricity. They're also looking at geothermal. But also many private and public agencies today are looking into more renewable possibilities for the Kenyan grid. And a couple things to remember about this nation is that there are social issues, including about half the nation living in urban and rural poverty. There are overcrowded households and very high unemployment rates. So, one thing we've talked about in the past is cook stoves and the health issues that come from that. In 2018, 83% of Kenyans used charcoal or solid biomass, other forms of it, to cook in their homes, typically with a 3-stone fire. So, for those who don't know, a 3-stone fire is a very common and very cheap form of a cook stove. And all you need for it is to surround a fire, biomass, with 3 basketball-sized, perhaps a little larger, stones. And you can perch on these stones a bowl, pot, kettle, etc., any cooking vessel that you're using, maybe a cauldron. And it rests above on the stones and is heated from these warm stones as well as the fire below. So one notable improvement in Kenya was the ceramic jiko in Swahili, which made burning solid biomass much more efficient, in turn reducing fuel consumption. So that's a step they took to becoming more efficient with their fuel. So according to the Kenya Energy Outlook, in the year 2000, a mere 3% of Kenyans had access to clean cooking, just 3%. So in 2018, which is very recently, still only 15% of Kenyans had access to clean cooking. There are future goals that look at improving these cooking conditions for better health and social equity. So one thing we've talked about is electrification, and Kenya has seen one of the fastest increases in electrification rates in sub-Saharan Africa since 2013. In the year 2000, 8% of the Kenyan population had access to electricity. And by 2018, very recently, 75% of the population had access. So although their domestic uses of electrification are quite low with cooking, clean cooking, still at 15% in 2018, a whole 75% of the population had access, according to the Kenya Energy Outlook. So Kenya does aim to reach full access to the grid by 2022, just 2 short years from now. Though it's a challenging goal, planned transmission lines will help this nation reach the goal, as well as microgrids. So electrification, as we've learned, is the most promising solution to cook stove-related health and safety issues. Kenya is a country with very high solar potential, with a roughly around the nation an average of 4.6 kilowatt hours per square meter. Solar power, as we know, does not require water. Some sources of power and electricity do, steam-generated plants, cooling turbines, etc. So in a water-stressed area such as Kenya, photovoltaic panels are a logical solution. So Overall, with many people living in rural communities in Kenya, solar-powered microgrids are a great answer to the issue of an unreliable macrogrid.